Layla Zarani had always dreamed of this day. The morning light in Riyadh cast a golden glow over the ornate room as she stared at her reflection in the mirror. Her hands trembled slightly as her stylist adjusted the delicate veil atop her intricately braided hair. Dressed in a breathtaking, hand-embroidered abaya, every detail around her, the soft scent of fresh jasmine flowers, the whispers of excitement, felt like something out of a fairy tale. "This is it," she whispered to herself, willing her nerves to settle. A knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. Amal, her best friend, entered, carrying a steaming cup of kawa. She placed it in Layla's hands, offering a reassuring smile. "Leia, this is your day. Don't let anything or anyone ruin it." But the peaceful moment shattered when Khalid's mother, Mariam al-Hussein, swept into the room unannounced. Draped in an outfit far too extravagant for the occasion, she carried an air of quiet disapproval. Her sharp gaze flickered over Layla, assessing. "That's the dress you chose?" Mariam mused, her smile saccharine, her words dripping with veiled disdain. "I imagined something more fitting." Layla felt the sting of the comment, an invisible slap. But she refused to react, knowing this was only the latest in a long line of passive-aggressive remarks. Mariam had never approved of her. Amal, never one to let such things slide, stepped in. "She looks breathtaking, doesn't she? A custom design, unlike anything from the souk." Mariam's lips tightened, but she said nothing. With a dramatic turn, she swept out of the room, leaving behind a suffocating silence. Hours later, the ceremony began. Layla felt like a vision as she walked down the aisle, but something was wrong. Khalid's demeanor was cold, distant. He avoided her gaze, his attention flitting to his phone, the screen lighting up with endless notifications. Each buzz felt like a slap, as though she were competing with something or someone unseen. The reception only worsened. Mariam took every opportunity to whisper disparaging remarks about Layla's guests, calling them loud, unsophisticated. Khalid did nothing to defend his bride. Instead, he either laughed nervously or remained silent. Then came the breaking point. Mariam took the microphone for a toast. At first, her words seemed harmless, even affectionate. But then she turned, her gaze settling on Layla with quiet malice. "Khalid, my dear, you have such a generous heart. I hope this marriage brings you everything you dream of, though some dreams don't always turn out as we hope." A heavy silence fell over the room. Layla felt every pair of eyes turn toward her, the weight of their stares pressing against her chest. Before she could process the insult, a commotion erupted behind her. Khalid and Amal were locked in a heated argument. "Khalid, stand up for her," Amal's voice rang out, furious and unyielding, and then the unthinkable happened. In a fit of rage, Khalid struck Layla across the face. The impact wasn't severe, but the shock of it sent ripples through the crowd. Gasps turned into murmurs, outrage thick in the air. Layla staggered slightly but held her ground, her heart pounding. Time slowed. Then, with quiet resolve, she straightened her spine and met his eyes. "This is over." Her voice was firm, unwavering. Without hesitation, she removed her wedding ring and threw it onto the main table, the sound of it clinking against the crystal glasses the only noise in the stunned silence. Then, head held high, she turned and walked out, the train of her wedding gown trailing behind her like a banner of defiance. Outside, Amal caught up to her, wrapping her in a tight embrace as the dam finally broke. Tears streamed down Layla's face, but even through the heartbreak, a new feeling stirred within her. Strength. "This isn't the end, Leah," Amal whispered. "It's just the beginning of something better." That night, Layla found herself in Amal's small but cozy apartment, where old photos of their travels lined the walls, reminders of who she had been before Khalid. She sat curled on the couch, a cup of mint tea untouched in her hands, the events of the day playing on repeat in her mind. "Do you want to talk about it?" Amal asked gently, handing her a warm blanket. Layla shook her head at first, but then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she spoke. "How did I let this happen? I thought he loved me. I thought—" Her voice cracked, raw with emotion. "He's a coward, Layla, but you're not." Amal's voice was steady, sure. "This might feel like the worst night of your life, but it's also the night you took your power back." Layla closed her eyes. She was shattered, but something inside her burned bright. A spark of determination, an ember of something new. "Tomorrow, we'll go together to get your things. You're not alone in this," Amal reassured her. Leah nodded, grateful for her friend's unwavering support, though fear and uncertainty gnawed at her. How would she face Khalid and Mariam the next day? How could she start over after investing so much in this relationship? The following morning, after a sleepless night, Leah and Amal drove to the apartment she had shared with Khalid. With the help of Samir, Leah's older brother, they planned to gather her belongings quickly before Khalid returned from work. "Are you sure you want to do this now? We could wait," Samir asked as he parked his car in front of the building. Leah took a deep breath, her resolve defying her lingering doubts. "Yes, I need to do this now," she replied firmly, stepping into the apartment. The familiar atmosphere hit her like a tidal wave. The framed photos of their shared adventures still adorned the walls. The faint scent of his cologne lingered in the air, and the echoes of their recent arguments seemed to haunt every corner of the space. Amal wasted no time. She grabbed boxes from Samir's car and began packing Leah's clothes and personal items, while Leah stood frozen in the middle of the living room. "Leah, don't look back. Just pack what you need. This place doesn't deserve your tears," Amal said firmly. Suddenly, the door burst open. Khalid had arrived earlier than expected. His face, marked by the remnants of a hangover, twisted with fury as his eyes landed on Leah and her friends. "What the hell is going on here?" he yelled, slamming the door behind him. Samir, tall and imposing, stepped between Khalid and Leah. "She's here to collect her things. Don't make this harder than it already is," Samir said calmly, though his tone carried a warning. Ignoring Samir, Khalid turned his attention to Leah. "So, this is how you handle things? Running away like a coward after everything I've done for you?" His words dripped with venom. Leah met his glare, feeling her fear morph into anger. "Everything you've done for me, letting your mother humiliate me, striking me in front of everyone? No, Khalid, you destroyed this, not me, and I won't stay to let you keep tearing me down," she said, her voice steady. Khalid stepped forward, but Samir stopped him with a firm hand on his chest. Don't take another step, Khalid. This is your only warning," Samir said, his voice low but resolute. For a moment, it seemed like Khalid might lash out, but Samir's presence made him hesitate. Breathing heavily, Khalid collapsed onto the sofa as Leah and Amal continued packing. "You know what, Leah? No one else will ever love you like I did. You're too much work," Khalid muttered, his voice a cruel whisper. His words were like daggers, but this time, Leah refused to let them wound her. Closing the final box, she turned to him and said, "I'd rather be alone than with someone who doesn't understand respect." With Samir and Amal's help, Leah loaded the boxes into the truck and left the apartment behind. As they drove away, she glanced at the building one last time. It had once symbolized her dreams of a happy future. Now, it was nothing more than a reminder of what she was leaving behind. At Samir's house, Leah began unpacking. Each item she placed in its new spot felt like a step toward reclaiming her life. Amal, as always, stayed by her side. "Leah, I've got an idea. Remember that fashion design project you always dreamed about? Now's the perfect time to start. You've got the talent, the creativity, and now the freedom," Amal encouraged. For the first time in days, Leah smiled. Though the weight of her past still lingered, a small spark of hope began to flicker inside her. "Maybe you're right, Amal. Maybe this is the start of something much better." In the days that followed, Leah worked on adjusting to her new reality. While the shadows of her past still loomed, her determination to rebuild her life grew stronger with each small step forward. Samir, ever the protective older brother, offered her a place to stay for as long as she needed, but Leah knew she didn't want to depend on anyone for long. One morning, over breakfast, Samir broke the silence. "Leah, I don't want to meddle, but have you thought about what you're going to do next? With your career? Or even where you'll live?" he asked, scrolling through his phone. Leah sighed. She had spent the last few days sorting through her thoughts, but still lacked a concrete plan. "I've been thinking about it. Maybe it's time to revisit my dream of starting a design business. It's something I always wanted, but I kept putting it off because..." Her voice trailed off as memories of Khalid's constant belittling of her ambitions surfaced. "Because of him," Samir finished, his tone sharp. "Well, he's not here to stop you anymore. Go for it, Leah. I know you can do it." Leah looked at her brother, then at Amal, who nodded with encouragement. For the first time in a long while, she truly believed it. "I will," she whispered, a newfound determination setting in. And with that, she took the first step toward a new beginning. That afternoon, accompanied by Amal, Leah began scouting rental spaces. The prices were steep, but she found a small shop in downtown Riyadh that seemed perfect for a design studio. The walls were peeling, and the floor needed repairs, but Leah saw potential in the space. "Are you sure you want to dive into this now?" Amal asked, kicking a piece of debris on the floor. "If I wait until everything's perfect, I'll never start. This is what I want, Amal. And I'm going to make it work," Leah said with conviction. With the help of Samir and a few friends, Leah began transforming the space. Late nights spent painting walls and arranging furniture brought moments of laughter and camaraderie, reminding her of the strength in human connections. Slowly, piece by piece, she was rebuilding her life. And surely the shop began to reflect her creativity and vision. One evening, as she reviewed the finishing touches, Samir handed her an envelope. "This came for you," he said, his expression shadowed with concern. Layla opened the envelope, and her heart sank as her eyes scanned the first few lines. It was a letter from Maryam. While it didn't contain direct threats, the words were steeped in disdain and malice. "I hope you realize what you've lost. Khalid deserves better than someone like you, and you will never be enough for anyone. Maybe it's time you return to where you belong and stop embarrassing yourself." The sting of the words was immediate, but something in Leah had shifted. Instead of crying or feeling defeated, she tore the letter into tiny pieces and tossed them into the trash. "I won't let her control my life anymore. Neither her nor Khalid," she declared, speaking more to herself than to Samir, her brother. The days turned into weeks, and soon her design studio officially opened its doors. Layla named it Nasha, Arabic for rebirth, as a symbol of her new chapter in life. Initially, business was slow, but word of mouth began to spread, and her talent quickly caught the attention of a local designer who invited her to collaborate on an important project. Just when everything seemed to be improving, her past came rushing back to haunt her. One afternoon, while she was sketching a design, A message from Khaled appeared on her phone. "Leah, we need to talk. I haven't stopped thinking about you." The words hit her like a cold wave. For a long moment, Layla sat frozen, her mind racing with anger and confusion. How could Khaled have the audacity to reach out after everything that had happened? "Who is it?" Amal, her best friend, asked, noticing Layla's expression. Layla handed her the phone, and Amal let out a disbelieving laugh. "Unbelievable. That man has no shame. Let me reply to him for you." "No, Amal. I'll handle it my way." After thinking it over, Layla chose not to respond. Instead, she blocked Khaled's number and returned to her work, determined not to let him interfere in her life again. However, the incident left her uneasy. Though she was moving forward, the fear that Khaled or Mariam might try to sabotage her progress still lingered. That night, as she was locking up her studio, she noticed a man standing at the corner, watching her. At first, she tried to ignore it, but unease turned to alarm when he began walking toward her. Her heart raced as she quickened her pace to her car. Once safely home, she recounted the incident to Samir. "Do you think he was sent by Khaled?" Samir asked, visibly concerned. I don't know. Maybe I'm overreacting, but something feels off." Samir nodded and promised to keep an eye out. Layla, on her part, refused to be intimidated. Though the fear was real, her determination to break free from Khaled and Mariam's shadow burned stronger. The days following the unsettling encounter were a mix of triumphs and tensions for Layla. On one hand, Nasha was gaining recognition. Satisfied clients spread the word about her unique designs, and for the first time in a long while, Leah felt like she was building something truly her own. On the other hand, the looming threat of Khaled or Mariam resurfacing kept her on edge. One afternoon, while she was busy working on a special commission for an influential client, Amal burst into the studio, visibly agitated. "Layla, you need to see this," Amal said, holding out her phone. It was a social media post from Mariam, laced with veiled insults. "Some women don't know their place, and some relationships fail when one person simply isn't enough." Though it didn't mention names, Layla knew the message was directed at her. But instead of anger or fear, a new emotion surged within her. Resolve. Layla straightened, meeting Amal's worried gaze with a steady determination. "Let her talk," Layla said. "She doesn't get to define me anymore." Amal nodded, a proud smile tugging at her lips. "That's my girl." Layla turned back to her work, her heart lighter than it had been in years. She was no longer the woman who cowered under Mariam's words or Khaled's manipulation. She was stronger now, and nothing, not their judgment, not their threats, would ever break her again. "Does she have nothing better to do?" Layla asked in frustration, dropping her pencil on the table. "She wants to provoke you, Layla. Don't give her the satisfaction. But you should be cautious. That woman isn't stable," Amal warned. Layla knew Amal was right, but refused to live in fear. That evening, as she was closing the studio, she noticed an envelope slipped under the door. Inside was a torn photograph from her wedding, accompanied by a handwritten note. "Don't think you can escape your place." The shock was immediate. Layla's hands trembled as she held the photo, her mind spiraling with questions. Was it Khaled? Mariam? Or someone else acting on their behalf? Back at home, both Amal and Samir urged her to report the incident to the police. "This isn't just manipulation anymore. It's harassment, Layla. You can't ignore it," Samir said, clearly upset. Reluctantly, Leah agreed. Though she hated the thought of reliving everything by explaining it to the authorities, she knew she needed to protect herself. The next day, she filed a report at the police station. However, the officer's response was far less helpful than she had hoped. Their dismissive attitude left her feeling both vulnerable and angry. "Miss, without clear evidence that this person poses a direct threat, the best we can do is file the report," the officer said, typing on his computer. Leah left the station feeling both helpless and more determined than ever not to let fear dictate her life. A few days later, fate took an unexpected turn in her favor. At a local design event in Riyadh, a renowned fashion editor took notice of her work. Impressed by her intricate designs, he proposed a collaboration for an upcoming issue of his magazine. "This could be the breakthrough you need to elevate your brand," Amal said, her excitement evident as Layla shared the news. While thrilled by the opportunity, Layla couldn't shake the feeling that success might draw unwanted attention from those who wished to see her fail. Her instincts proved correct. One evening, while working late on her designs for the magazine, she received a message from an unknown number. Opening it, she found a photo of her studio taken from outside, accompanied by a chilling text. "Be careful what you wish for." The fear was suffocating, but this time she refused to stay silent. She called Samir, who arrived at the studio within minutes. "We're setting up security cameras. If they're trying to intimidate you, they'll regret it," Samir said firmly, inspecting the entrances. By the next day, the cameras were installed, offering a small measure of relief. Yet, the feeling of being watched lingered. Whenever she walked through the bustling streets of Riyadh, she felt unseen eyes on her, shadows that disappeared the moment she turned to look. One afternoon, while reviewing the security footage, she noticed something unnerving. A man in a dark cap loitering outside her studio. He didn't try to enter, but his behavior was suspicious. Layla brought the footage to the police, hoping this time they would act. "This is more concrete. We'll investigate, but we advise you to stay cautious," the officer said. "Have you noticed anything else unusual recently?" he added. "Yes," Leah replied, her voice trembling. "I feel like someone is following me, but I can't figure out who." That evening, as she shared her worries over dinner with Samir and Amal, she tried to make sense of the situation. Why would someone want to harm her? How far were they willing to go? "Leah, maybe it's time to consider hiring private security, at least until we figure out who's behind this," Samir suggested. Though hesitant, Layla knew her brother was right. Private security was expensive, but her peace of mind was priceless. Within days, a security guard began patrolling her studio and Samir's home. While the guard's presence provided a semblance of safety, Layla couldn't shake the nagging suspicion that the danger was closer than she realized. The decision to hire private security brought temporary relief. The guard's intermittent presence seemed enough to deter any immediate threats. Still, the fear persisted. Long nights at Samir's home became a battle with insomnia, as every creak of the floorboards or whisper of the wind set her on edge. One night, as she sketched designs in her room, Samir entered with a grave expression. "I just spoke to the guard. He saw someone lurking near the house earlier, but when he went to check, no one was there," Samir said, crossing his arms. Layla's face tightened. The idea of someone being so close was chilling. "Do you think it could be Khalid?" she whispered. "I don't know, Leah, but whoever it is, we'll find them," Samir assured her, leaning down and giving her hand a reassuring squeeze. "You're not alone." The next day at the studio, things seemed to return to normal. Clients visited, orders poured in, and for a brief moment, Layla allowed herself to focus solely on her work. But that peace shattered when a stranger walked into the store. He was casually dressed, his face partially hidden by a cap. He seemed uneasy, scanning the room as though searching for something, or someone. "Can I help you?" Layla asked from behind the counter, forcing herself to sound professional despite the knot forming in her stomach. The man didn't reply right away. Instead, he approached the counter slowly, placing both hands on the surface. "Are you Layla?" he asked in a low, almost threatening tone. Layla swallowed hard, but her voice remained steady. "Yes. What do you need?" she replied firmly. The man stared at her for what felt like an eternity before pulling an envelope from his pocket and setting it in front of her. Leah waited until he was out of sight before cautiously opening it. Inside was a handwritten note. "Leah, stop what you're doing before things get worse for you. This isn't a warning, it's a promise." Her hands trembled as she held the letter, fear gripping her chest. Without wasting a moment, she called Samir and Amal. "This has gone too far. I can't handle this anymore," she said, showing them the letter when they arrived at the studio. Amal, ever the bold one, snatched the letter and tore it into pieces. "Layla, you can't let them scare you. That's exactly what they want," Amal said firmly, though the worry in her eyes betrayed her calm demeanor. Samir, always the protector, decided on more drastic measures. He installed additional locks on the studio door and began escorting Layla whenever she went out. These actions provided some reassurance, but the feeling of being watched never truly left her. That evening, as the three of them sat down for dinner, Leah's phone buzzed. The message she received froze her in place. A photo taken from outside the house showing her, Samir, and Amal sitting at the table. The accompanying text read, "Do you really think you're safe?" For a moment, terror paralyzed her, but Samir reacted quickly, grabbing her phone and immediately calling the police. "This isn't just harassment anymore. This is a direct threat," he said with restrained fury while speaking to the officers. Despite their assurances to investigate, Layla knew she couldn't rely solely on the authorities. That night, as she lay in bed, sleep eluded her. Her mind was a whirlwind of questions. Who could be behind this? Mariam, Khaled, or someone else with darker intentions? The next day, as Leah worked in her studio, an unexpected visitor arrived. It was Khaled. The tension in the room thickened immediately. Dressed impeccably in a tailored suit, his expression carried an unsettling mix of regret and resolve. Layla's emotions churned between anger and fear as she faced him. "What are you doing here?" she demanded, her tone laced with indignation. Khaled raised his hands in a placating gesture. "I just want to talk, Layla. Please, hear me out." "Talk? After everything you've done?" "I don't think there's anything left to discuss," she said, her voice steady, though her heart pounded wildly. "I know I made mistakes, Layla. I've been thinking about us and I want to make things right," he said, stepping closer. Leah instinctively backed away. "Make things right? Do you think a few sweet words can erase what you did?" Her voice cracked slightly, but she held back her tears. Before Khaled could respond, Samir entered the studio. His protective instincts kicked in instantly. "What are you doing here, Khaled?" he demanded, stepping between him and Layla. Khaled sighed, his gaze shifting from Samir to Layla. "I just want to talk. That's all." "You lost that right a long time ago," Samir shot back, his voice dangerously low. Layla took a deep breath and met Khaled's gaze. "Leave, Khaled. Whatever we had is over, and nothing you say will change that." For a brief moment, something flickered in Khaled's eyes. Anger, sadness, regret. But then he straightened his tie and turned toward the door. "You'll regret this, Layla," he murmured before walking out. The words sent a shiver down her spine, but she refused to let them control her. She had come too far to let fear win now. As Samir locked the door behind him, he turned to Layla. "We need to be more careful than ever." Layla nodded, her resolve hardening. "I won't let him ruin what I've built. Not this time." And with that, she turned back to her work, determined to reclaim her life, no matter what it took. Khalid's hands went up again, this time in surrender. "I just wanted to talk, but clearly I'm not welcome," he said, turning to Layla one last time. "This isn't over, Layla," he added before leaving, his words leaving a lingering chill in the air. Samir slammed the door shut and turned to his sister. "That's enough, Layla. We need to make sure he doesn't bother you again." That night, Layla made a firm decision, not only to protect herself, but to confront whoever was behind these threats, no matter the consequences. As she sat with Amal and Samir in the kitchen, her resolve hardened. "I won't let Khalid, Mariam, or whoever else is behind this take away everything I've built. But I also can't keep living in fear," she said, her voice steady and determined. "Then we need a plan," Amal said, crossing her arms with a thoughtful look. "First, we'll make sure your security is airtight. We already have cameras, but we should add more. We'll also consult a lawyer in case this escalates. And even if the police aren't fully reliable, we need to keep them informed." Leah nodded, knowing her friends were right. The next day, they met with a lawyer, a composed older man with a calming presence. He listened intently as Layla recounted the series of events. "Layla, what you're describing qualifies as harassment and direct threats. We can file for a restraining order against Khalid and his family, but I'll need solid evidence to back the case," he said, adjusting his glasses. Layla handed over the photos, messages, and footage from the security cameras, hoping it would suffice. "With this, we can start building a case. But keep in mind, this process will take time. In the meantime, focus on staying safe," he advised. While the meeting brought a small measure of relief, Layla knew the road ahead was long and uncertain. That night, as she reviewed the security footage on her phone, something unusual caught her eye. A shadowy figure briefly appeared outside the design studio, then vanished into the darkness. Without hesitation, Leah called Samir, who arrived shortly with the security guard. Together, they reviewed the surveillance footage more carefully and discovered the intruder had lingered outside for at least 15 minutes, circling the building as if searching for a way in. "This isn't a coincidence. Someone's trying to intimidate you," Samir said, his voice edged with anger. "What if they try something worse?" Layla asked, a knot tightening in her stomach. Samir didn't respond immediately, but the look in his eyes said it all. They were dealing with someone who wouldn't back down easily. A few days later, as Leah worked on a special project for a prominent magazine, an unexpected call interrupted her focus. The voice on the other end was unmistakable. "Leah, we need to talk," said Mariam, her tone icy and deliberate. "I have nothing to say to you, Mariam. You've made your point abundantly clear," Layla replied, gripping the phone tightly. "Oh, darling, this isn't an invitation. It's a warning. Khalid isn't the type to give up easily, and neither am I. Do you really think you can move on as if nothing happened?" Mariam's laugh on the other end felt like a dagger twisting in Layla's chest. Without waiting for more, Layla ended the call abruptly. Her breathing was heavy, but instead of succumbing to panic, she immediately called her lawyer. "Mariam just threatened me. This needs to stop. What else can we do?" she asked, fighting to keep her composure. The lawyer reassured her that the call strengthened her case, but cautioned her to proceed carefully. He advised Layla to avoid direct confrontations for her safety. That night, her fear began to transform into fury. Layla refused to let Mariam or Khalid control her life. With the support of Samir and Amal, she decided to organize an opening event for her studio. An act of defiance to prove she wouldn't be intimidated. On the night of the grand opening, the studio buzzed with energy, filled with friends, clients, and curious visitors. Layla wore one of her boldest designs, a striking emerald gown that radiated confidence and strength. Her heart raced, but her smile never wavered. "This is amazing, Leah. Look at everything you've accomplished," Amal said, embracing her tightly. The festive atmosphere, however, was interrupted when Layla noticed someone lurking at the edge of the crowd. It was Khalid, holding a glass of sparkling juice and wearing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Layla's stomach tightened, but she refused to let fear dictate her night. Straightening her shoulders, she met his gaze head-on. "Enjoy the party, Khalid, because this is the last time you'll ever have a place in my world." For a moment, something flickered in his expression. Frustration, perhaps even regret. But Layla didn't wait for a response. She turned her back on him, walking toward Amal and Samir, embracing the strength and freedom she had fought so hard to reclaim. Layla's breath caught, but she steadied herself and walked toward him with purpose. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her tone sharp and unwavering. "I just came to congratulate you, Leah. You've done something interesting here, though I wonder how long it will last," Khalid said with a smirk, his words dripping with sarcasm. Samir appeared at Layla's side in an instant. "Khalid, leave now, or I'll make sure you regret staying," he said, his voice filled with barely restrained fury. Khalid raised his hands in mock surrender, his smirk unrelenting. "Relax, I'm just here to admire the place. Congratulations, Leah. Enjoy your moment in the spotlight." With those words, he walked away, leaving a palpable tension in his wake. Layla knew this wouldn't be the last time Khalid tried to interfere in her life, but as she looked around the room, seeing her friends and supporters enjoying the event, she felt a glimmer of hope. She couldn't control everything, but she could choose how to respond. Despite the evening's success, Khalid's unwelcome presence cast a shadow over the celebration. Later that night, as she locked up the studio with Samir's help, Layla's resolve was clear. "Leah, I know you don't want to hear this, but you should think about hiring extra security for the magazine event," Samir said, double-checking the lock. "You're right," Layla sighed. "I won't give them another chance to ruin anything." In the days that followed, Layla poured herself into preparations for the magazine feature. Her designs were bolder than ever, reflecting not just her creativity, but her resilience. Yet the unsettling feeling of being watched persisted. One afternoon, as Amal helped with final stitching on a piece, a strange sound came from outside the studio. Samir, who was nearby, went to investigate but found nothing, except a wilted flower left at the door. It seemed like a message, but from whom? Harmless enough, but Leah knew better. This wasn't random. "This isn't a coincidence, Amal. Someone wants to remind me they're watching," she said, picking up the flower carefully, refusing to let fear consume her. Amal crossed her arms, her expression hardening. "Let them watch. You've got nothing to hide. We're not going to stop because of their schemes." Her voice was steady, but concern flickered in her eyes. The day of the long-awaited magazine showcase had finally arrived. Layla, dressed in an abaya she had designed herself, radiated confidence. The venue was elegantly arranged, filled with a mix of clients, designers, and influential figures from the fashion industry. For a brief moment, everything seemed flawless. But perfection didn't last long. As Layla showcased her designs on the runway, she caught sight of a familiar figure sitting in the back row. Mariam. Her expression was cold, unreadable. Beside her sat a man Layla didn't recognize, scribbling notes in a small notebook. Her heart pounded, but she chose to ignore them. She refused to let their presence overshadow her moment. However, as the event came to a close and guests began to leave, Mariam approached her. "Layla, darling, I couldn't miss this. How fascinating to see you in your element." though I must admit I expected something more impressive," Miriam said, her smile sharp and insincere. Layla stared directly at her, feeling anger bubble beneath the surface. "Miriam, you have no business being here. If you think you can intimidate me, you're wasting your time." Her tone was resolute, though she kept her composure. Miriam chuckled softly, as if Layla's words meant nothing. "Don't misunderstand me. I'm only here to observe. But here's a piece of advice for you. Don't get your hopes up. This little success won't last." Before Layla could respond, her brother Samir appeared by her side. "It's time for you to leave, Miriam. You've said enough." His voice was firm, and his commanding stance made it clear he wouldn't tolerate any further disrespect. Miriam hesitated, but eventually turned on her heel, throwing one last disdainful glance over her shoulder as she left. That night, Leah returned home, exhausted, drained both physically and emotionally. Despite the professional triumph of the event, Miriam's presence and her mysterious companion left an unpleasant aftertaste. But as she sat alone in her quiet apartment, she realized something profound. No matter how hard they tried, they couldn't take this away from her. She had built something from nothing, and she wasn't about to let anyone tear it down. This wasn't an ending. It was just the beginning. "You can't handle this alone anymore, Leah. Let me hire someone to figure out who's behind all of this," Samir said as he poured a cup of mint tea for his sister. Layla nodded, finally admitting to herself that she needed help. The next day, Samir contacted a private investigator named Ali, known for his discretion and efficiency. "I'll start by reviewing the footage from your security cameras and tracking any suspicious activity. I'll also look deeper into Miriam and Khalid. If they're behind this, we'll find out," Ali explained during their first meeting. While Leah still wrestled with fear and uncertainty, knowing someone was actively working to uncover the truth gave her a sliver of relief. A few days later, Ali returned with findings. He had identified the man accompanying Miriam at the event, a known associate of Khalid with a history of intimidation and blackmail. "This confirms they're trying to scare you, Layla, but what's even more concerning is that this man has been spotted loitering near your studio multiple times," Ali reported. Layla's fear turned to fury. They weren't just trying to sabotage her career, they were threatening her safety. "They won't win. If they want a fight, they'll get one," she said, her voice filled with determination. That night, as she worked on her sketches at home, a realization struck her. For too long, she had let others dictate her life. Now it was time to take full control. With Ali's information in hand, Leah resolved to take decisive action. The fear that had once immobilized her now fueled her resolve. She knew she couldn't confront Miriam and Khalid recklessly. She needed to be strategic. The following morning, she sat with Samir and her best friend, Amal, to formulate a plan. "First, let's ensure they can't come near you again. If Ali has enough evidence, we can push for a restraining order," Samir said as he reviewed some legal documents. "And second, you need to expose them. Show them you're not afraid to fight back," Amal added, her straightforwardness always a source of strength. Leah nodded. Though the idea of going public with the situation was difficult to accept, she knew staying silent would only empower them further. A few days later, Rashid, her legal counsel, arranged a meeting with Layla and her attorney. He had uncovered new information that not only strengthened their case, but also revealed something far more troubling. "We've discovered that Miriam is using her network of influential contacts to stall the investigation. She's leveraging people in powerful positions who could interfere with the case," Rashid explained gravely. Leah felt a surge of anger rise within her. "What can I do to stop this? I can't let them get away with it again." "We need to bring this to the public's attention. If people know what's happening, it will be much harder for Miriam to manipulate the system," Rashid suggested. The lawyer nodded in agreement. "You've already given one interview, but it might be time to take an even bigger step. Layla understood the risks of exposing herself further, but she also knew it was necessary. With the help of Rashid and Amal, she organized a press conference. The event was held in her art studio, surrounded by friends, clients, and a room full of reporters. "I'm here today to speak out, not just about what I've endured, but about what so many endure in silence: harassment, intimidation, and abuse of power. No one should have to live in fear. And today, I say, enough." Layla's words rang with conviction, and the cameras captured every moment. The press conference had an immediate impact. Journalists began digging into Mariam and Khalid's actions, and public pressure mounted. Messages of support flooded in. Though Layla knew this newfound attention could provoke retaliation. That night, as she reviewed footage from her studio's security cameras, Rashid called her. His tone was tense. "Leah, you need to hear this." He had intercepted a phone call between Mariam and Khalid. In the recording, Mariam laid out a plan to discredit Layla and, if necessary, resort to violence to silence her. "We won't let her ruin our reputation. If it comes to it, we'll make her disappear for a while." Layla's grip tightened on the phone, her pulse hammering in her ears. "They've gone too far," she murmured. Samir, sitting across from her, watched her carefully. "Then we hit back harder. We take this to the authorities. No more waiting." Layla nodded, her fear now completely replaced by determination. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about standing up to the people who thought they could silence her, and she would make sure they never got that chance. Mariam's cold, calculated voice echoed. Fear crept back into Layla's heart, but this time it was matched by an unshakable resolve. "I'm done hiding. They need to know I won't back down," she declared, looking at Amal and Rashid with fierce determination. The battle was about to reach its breaking point. The next day, Layla, accompanied by Amal, Rashid, and her brother Samir, presented the intercepted recording to the authorities as additional evidence. The response was immediate. Mariam and Khalid were summoned for questioning, and the case gained even more traction in the media. Meanwhile, Rashid arranged for a critical meeting. An influential journalist from a national outlet wanted to tell Layla's story in full. Though Layla knew this would thrust her further into the spotlight, she understood it was the best way to ensure Mariam and Khalid couldn't twist the narrative in their favor. The interview took place in Layla's studio, now fortified with extra security measures. The journalist, a woman with sharp eyes and a calm, steady voice, began the conversation with questions about Layla's career before delving into the darker chapters of her story. "Layla, you've spoken about the harassment you faced, but how has this affected your personal and professional life?" she asked, leaning closer with the microphone. Layla took a deep breath before responding. "It's been devastating. I have lost countless nights of sleep. I've lived in fear, constantly defending myself against attacks. But it has also taught me to be stronger, to refuse to stay silent and to fight for what I deserve." Her voice was steady, but her eyes revealed the vulnerability she still carried. The interview aired that evening, and the reactions were swift. While many people expressed their support for Layla, Mariam's allies began to distance themselves, fearful of being caught in the ensuing scandal. Mariam and Khalid, however, remained silent, though it was clear they were feeling the pressure. A few days later, Samir received a call that led to a critical discovery. A former employee of Mariam, angered by years of mistreatment, decided to come forward and testify against her. His account detailed a long pattern of intimidation and manipulation that not only strengthened Layla's case, but also exposed Mariam's true nature to the public. Armed with this new evidence, authorities took action. Mariam was formally charged with harassment, defamation, and conspiracy to intimidate. Khaled, though less involved, faced charges for his role in the harassment as well. The day of the trial was tense. Layla, wearing one of her own designs, sat in the courtroom flanked by Samir and Amal. Mariam and Khaled, though trying to appear calm, couldn't hide the strain etched on their faces. When it was time for Layla to testify, she stood and addressed the jury. For months, I've been a victim of harassment and intimidation. I've received threats, been followed, and had my reputation relentlessly attacked. But today, I'm here to tell you that no one has the right to destroy another person's dreams. Mariam and Khaled used their influence to try to silence me, but they failed, and they will continue to fail. Layla's words reverberated through the courtroom, her strength palpable to everyone present. The trial stretched on for weeks, but at last, the verdict was delivered. Mariam was found guilty on all charges and sentenced to several years in prison. Khaled received a lighter sentence, but one that effectively ensured he would no longer have a place in Layla's life. As Layla exited the courthouse, she was met with a crowd of friends, clients, and supporters who had been inspired by her resilience. Though the battle had been long and grueling, she had achieved something far greater than justice. She had proven that fear should never outweigh determination. In the months that followed, Layla's life began to rebuild itself. Her design studio became a symbol of resilience, and her work gained even greater recognition. Most importantly, Layla rediscovered her self-worth and her ability to shape her future on her own terms. One evening, as she watched the sunset from the balcony of her new home, Amal and Samir joined her with a bottle of sparkling pomegranate juice in hand. As they clinked their glasses together, a smile spread across Layla's face. She had won, not just in court, but in reclaiming her life. And this was just the beginning. Leah, you did it. You've shown the world that nothing and no one can hold you back, Amal said, raising her glass. Layla smiled, her heart full of gratitude. I didn't do it alone, but I did learn one thing. Sometimes, the darkest moments lead us to discover our brightest light. As they clinked their glasses together, laughter filled the air, a symbol of triumph and newfound strength. The battle had been hard fought, but Layla had emerged stronger, wiser, and unshakable. Thank you for staying with us through Layla's journey of resilience and rediscovery. Her story is a powerful reminder that even in the face of betrayal and heartbreak, we have the strength to rebuild and chase the dreams we once thought were out of reach. She proved that fear and intimidation could not define her future. Only her courage and determination could. What would you do if you were in Layla's shoes? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And let's start a conversation about courage, self-worth, and the power of new beginnings. If this story moved you, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another inspiring tale. Together, we can explore more stories that touch the heart and ignite the soul. Until next time, keep believing in your strength and never let anyone dim your light.